So, welcome to the Co Away podcast, which is devoted to the idea that a team of people led by a good owner, sharing best practices and a culture built on trust and respect will complete better projects. That's the Co Away. I'm Howie Ferguson. I'm COA's executive director. And today we're talking with a great friend and a great friend to COA and a true professional, Keith Douglas with Whiting Turner. Hello, Keith. And if you would, for those who don't know, give us the brief version of your sort of professional journey and what you do, who you do it for, and how you ended up there.
Yeah, despite the way I think I look, I'm actually 40 years in the industry this May. So I've been doing this for a long time. And I'm getting more and more asked about when are you retiring? So I'm thinking that means I'm not so good as I used to be. But
Why do they keep asking me that?
I don't know. Obviously, I don't look as young as I think I do. But yeah, so I've got 40 years in the industry. I was a civil engineer out of University of Virginia, and I started work with Whiting Turner that Monday after I graduated on Saturday in Richmond. Spent 10 years in Richmond, and obviously I'm still with the company, but my journey's been kind of interesting. But I came to Atlanta when the Olympics were coming, and got involved in the Olympic construction, built the aquatic center for the Olympics, and I kind of told my wife, I go, hey, we're burning the ship, we're moving to Atlanta, we're selling our house, we're going to open up an office, and she's thinking, oh, that sounds fun. I'll get to go down to the Olympics and see all that stuff, but he'll never be able to open up an office. What does he know about Atlanta? And we'll get to go back home to Richmond. So,
Perfect.
but we were successful, and off we went. And now Atlanta's kind of the hub for the Southeast. So I think we've got 16 offices through the Southeast now.
And Keith, to these days, closer to retirement, not there, but how involved in operations project stuff are you anymore? I know you love, because we worked together, for those who don't know, a long time ago on a University of Florida project, and I got a glimpse of how much you love to still dork out and get in the weeds and do some estimating. And how much do you get to still do that?
I still get to play on certain projects. It's really just where people really need my expertise. But what we did on the nano job there at UF, I love that project. And that's really kind of what I love. So obviously, in my position now, and I've got different offices reporting, I can't play in the sandbox like I used to. So I play where I want to play. So it might be, our cool projects down at Disney or something up in North Carolina. But it's just where people value my input a little bit and where I have fun doing it. So, but the biggest thing for me is to try to figure out ways to motivate these younger kids coming up through the pipeline to do the kind of things that I used to do, because I think that's kind of what added the value.
Okay, so on that note, because it relates to something I was hoping to talk about, and you thankfully took us right there. How do you do that, Keith? How do you personally, or maybe it's a Whiting Turner thing, maybe it's a Keith Douglas thing, how do you motivate those younger folks? And is it different than it was maybe 15 years ago?
Oh, I think it's insanely different now because, when I look back at what I used to do, I started in high school, I was a draftsman. So I was really good at understanding drawings and how they worked and stuff. And I realized very early on that most owners want to know what stuff's going to cost before it's on paper. When they need conceptual estimating. So I learned how to get really good at that. But back then everything was very visual. It was all drawings, models, all kinds of stuff. And I really worry about this generation that they're going to lose some of that understanding, that intuitive stuff that you bring to the table when everything is living in the digital world now. I think it's easier to be detached from that kind of stuff. So I'm always trying to get the younger kids to figure out ways to add value. What is of value to the owners or the architects, and what can you do to help them deliver on that and get engaged? Back then, when I was doing it, it was a lot of redlining drawings and estimating on the fly like we did at Nano and stuff like that. But I think it's harder for these kids now.
So again, what is your style? I'm kind of trying to peer into a Keith mentoring a younger person. Like, is your style kind of motivational, encouraging? Does it depend on the person? Is it more with a whip and is a carrot
No,
versus stick? Like, how do you do it?
no, everybody's different. I've never been fond of the stick thing. It's more of the carrot. I love to spend time with the young people and try to understand what their goals are. And almost all of them will tell you, I want to be a vice president, or I want to get to this level or that level. But the timeline that they're on that they think they're on is usually completely different than reality. Reality is they'll progress a lot faster, but they're not doing the foundational things that they need to do to put them in a position to be that place. And it might be hiring, it might be learning, doing what I did back before, learning what is of value to the owner and becoming really good at whatever that thing is, and doing the hard foundational work. But I love coaching these kids up, though. That's probably the biggest joy I get at this age now, is trying to figure out ways to motivate them, and it's different for everybody.
Right. Well, like a coach dealing with players, you can't treat them. Everyone has their buttons, and so that makes sense. Okay, so from afar, somewhat afar, certainly it's been years since I did an actual project with your company, but I think I know it pretty well because of Koa and Whiting Turner's relationship. And I've noticed, Keith, and this is not, I said before we hit record, I'm not a blow smoke up skirt guy, but I'm a fan. What you all do culturally, there's something special there. Can you talk about that, and maybe not the details of recruiting and retaining and training and developing talent, but the cultural piece and how that works and how you've been a part of leading that in your company?
Well, first and foremost, I think the biggest secret sauce that we have is we almost exclusively hire right out of school and train and promote from within. So we home grow our staff. We're also very decentralized, meaning that we want really well-rounded managers. So we want them to not only understand how to put construction in place, but they need to understand how to price it, do the pre-construction and all that stuff, because all that stuff you do in the front end is tremendous value in the construction phase. So we're really unique on that front in the industry. I mean, most companies have no problem hiring mid-career people, and that's really difficult to keep the culture the way you want it. It's very easy when you're homegrown your people and you're just indoctrinating them in this culture as you go. So I think that makes a huge difference.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of like as usual, I go to some sports analogy, but are you going to be the Yankees and pay a bunch of money to get guys from other teams, or are you going to have a farm system that grows them? And you could probably do it either way. You all choose to do the.
Plus, you really know your people well, and you know what they're capable of, and you know what they're not capable of, so you can cherry pick the right people for the right task at hand versus somebody you just hired off the street and you don't know what they're capable of. I mean, your relationships with your owners are really the most valuable thing you have, and the worst thing you do is mess that up by putting somebody out there you don't know.
Right. Yeah, that totally makes sense. So whether it's about talent acquisition or retention, Keith, or delivering projects or supply chain or whatever, wherever you want to go in the professional context, what is, I hate the phrase, what keeps you up at night? What is your top one or two concerns, and what are you doing to try to mitigate or offset those concerns, whatever they are?
Well, the top concerns kind of varied dramatically over time. 3 years ago, we were sitting here staring down COVID, and everybody thought the whole world was coming to an end. So, internally, we made the decision we were going to keep everybody. We're not doing any layoffs. A lot of our competitors did layoffs, but we were going to keep everybody. But we really thought we were going to have to pivot into a lot of new industries, and we really thought that the supply of work was going to throttle down big time. So despite all of those worries and concerns, that never really happened. So thankfully we didn't lay anybody off. We probably arguably should have hired more talent in that time period, but we were a little bit nervous. So you can stay up at night worrying about a lot of things, but the reality is a lot of things never really happen. So it's better to be prepared, to be nimble and react to whatever the changing conditions are, and deal with them. So, kind of like in World War II, if you're a history buff, I don't know if you've read any Stephen Ambrose books, but despite years of planning the D-Day invasion, nothing happened right, during that initial invasion, paratroopers were dropped in the wrong place and they're separated from their units. People landed on the wrong beaches. So despite all of that, it was a huge success because, the young individuals were trained on how to make decisions and react to what they saw at that time, as opposed to this big chain of command that the Germans had. So, I'm a huge fan of Stephen Ambrose. So there's a lot of business things that could be learned from that kind of decision making.
Right. Yeah, the nimble piece and being able to, even though we all got sick of the word pivot,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's a pretty big deal. So all that said, Keith, let's instead of trying to look back 20 years, because you're right,
Yep.
things, but right now in 2023, what do you think that the top concern is for you?
I mean, right now, interest rates are probably going to kill projects. So there's a risk of some markets imploding a little bit. There's the banking industry crisis that we saw. Commodity prices have been going up. Inflation's been going up. All that stuff is probably going to kill some projects. And, all this talk about inflation coming on. So a lot of people were worried about that. But I don't think that this recession, if it comes, is going to really impact our industry as much as past recessions. I think there's such a demand to build more robust and resilient supply chains that I think you're going to see a lot of manufacturing return to our soil. So I think that you'll see, not to overuse the word pivot again, but I think you'll see certain contractors have to pivot into new markets. Multifamily, which has been going gangbusters, eventually that party's got to come to an end, and there's manufacturing is going to take off like crazy. So you just have to be ready.
And what about with the big infrastructure bill last year? Whiting Turner doesn't do a lot of horizontal work, am I right?
We did in our early years in the company. We did a lot of bridges and dams and highways and stuff like that, but we don't really do much of that now.
Right.
We're more mainstream commercial.
Right. Mostly vertical.
Yeah.
All right. Well, speaking of pivot, I'm going to pivot a totally different way. And I think I kind of have an answer or a little bit of knowledge on this, Keith, because I think I've observed it, but maybe I'm wrong, and who cares? Because we're here to let the rest of the world know about Keith. When you're faced, maybe personally at home, but especially in the office, and we all have those moments. Maybe it's a one-on-one, maybe it's a group thing where there's tension, struggle, drama, those things that make work or life harder. What is you? And there's no wrong answer, but I know you have a methodology, a style. Mine is I always diffuse tension with humor. Sometimes it blows up in my face. Sometimes it works. What is your kind of go-to when it comes to diffusing toxic situations or tense situations?
Yeah, I'm like everybody else. I mean, I hate that kind of environment and stuff. So I will do whatever in my power to kind of kill it. I'm a lot like you. I love humor. There's a time and a place for humor, but humor will at least relax people. But I think you just have to be a good role model. I mean, I think if you're one of those types that creates tension, you're going to it'll breed itself around you and stuff. And if you're the type who's not a drama king or whatever, and you don't make a mountain out of a molehill over something, that's what you'll be surrounded by the best people. And, and that's a really good trait of an owner, because construction is not a perfect process by any means, and stuff happens and bad stuff can happen despite everybody's good intentions. And an owner that just overreacts and stuff, everybody retreats to their corner, gets defensive. But, the good owners, and we've worked with a lot of them, but the good owners will understand that stuff happens. They'll encourage you to throw stuff on the table, problems on the table, because they realize that collectively we're all going to fix that problem a lot better than, everybody working on it independently.
Yeah. And I have a theory on that, Keith, and it could be partially right, or I don't think it's totally wrong. I think a lot of that, when owners don't act in a good owner way, I think a lot of it stems from insecurity.
Yeah.
It's the oh God, I'm going to get fired because this thing happened, so I'm going to shoot everybody else in the room.
Yeah.
Or it's some kind of reaction like that. I don't think most people are trying to be hard to work with or bad. It's just an insecurity reaction.
Yep.
That's kind of my sense.
I learned a lot when I came down to Atlanta and we were hired to build the aquatic center for the Olympics. That was a really valuable project in my career development because here we had an owner where failure was really not an option at all. If the project's late, that's not going to happen. The project's got to get done. So they really fostered an environment where if something happened, they wanted you to throw that problem on the table. Don't bury it. And collectively, we've all got to get through this. Really didn't matter who screwed up. They didn't really care. But collectively, we have to fix this. So I've never been, I don't say never been, but that was an early stage where I really saw collaboration on steroids. Where there was no blame game. We're all in this together. And, we had some serious problems or challenges between settlement that nobody predicted, that was messing up the pool, but again, it's not anybody's fault. We're all in this together. And, I really learned and took a lot of that style with me later in my career.
It's interesting. I wonder if part of that, and you're right, that had to have been Summer Olympics 96. That must have been
Yeah.
94, 95, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
I wonder, Keith, maybe not, but I wonder if part of that stems from the fact that it was kind of a one-time collection. Like there wasn't people looking for their 20-year career and pleasing them. It was just, we got to get this done and we're all
Yeah.
out of here in 18 months.
Yep. No, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Interesting. That would have been a blast to be part of that.
Yeah.
Speaking of COA friends, did you know that Marvin Woodward got his start with construction in the Olympics in Atlanta? That's what brought him to Atlanta as well.
Where was he working? Do you remember?
I don't. And this is
Am I allowed
probably
to ask you questions?
yeah. Well, yeah. Well, I just went off the rails on this being a good podcast, right? Because people are like, "Well, who's Marvin Woodward?" Marvin is a common friend, a great COA friend, and now actually a contractor or a consultant as opposed to being an owner. But yeah, I think civil, some kind of horizontal work for the Olympics
Okay.
is what brought him to Atlanta. So you guys
I
have that.
didn't know him during the Olympics, but I got to know him really well when he was with GSFIC. But you talk about if I can go get sidetracked for a minute.
Do it.
Martin is one of those guys that came into an organization that no one from the contracting world really wanted to work for GSFIC. And he took that organization in a couple of years and made them a prized owner of many. And, people were fighting over getting their work. A lot of it was university work from the Board of Regents side of things, but it was all through Marvin. But he really transformed that organization at the time he was there. So he's way up on a pedestal in my mind.
Yeah, grade A. One of the best. All right, so just one more, Keith. We'll wrap this up. And thanks. It's been great to catch up even before we hit record, but always great to spend time with you. This is a little bit cliche, but that's okay, Keith, because I'm especially interested. If there's a person, maybe it's in the personal life, maybe it's professional, maybe it's Whiting Turner, maybe it's not. If there was a person who had the biggest impact on you and your career, could you identify one person?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And that was early in my career. So my first 5 years, my boss was my boss and best friend, Dave Hummel. He introduced Ann and I to each other. But unfortunately, Dave got sick. He got cancer, and he was gone within, I don't know, 6 or 9 months. But Dave, during his short illness, he really thought he was going to beat that cancer. And he had a small group. I ran one of his projects. He probably had like 3 or 4 projects going. But in that short time that he was sick, he really wanted me to learn to find work because he needed to keep his group together because all of his projects were wrapping up. And he really thought he was going to beat it. So you got to find work for me. So in 6 months, he taught me how to do business development, even though, I'm really a builder, but he taught me what's important to customers, what owners want, what you need to get good at, and all that stuff. So when Dave died, I had gotten so comfortable. He pushed me out of my comfort zone more than anybody. But in that short time, I got so far out of my comfort zone, I started getting comfortable with that, which really changed the way I looked at everything. It's okay to be uncomfortable. You're never going to get better unless you're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But that's really a pivotal point in my career, which really launched me into things that I never thought I could do.
That's so incredible, and it would be just as incredible if it was just the professional side, but the fact that he introduced you to
Oh yeah,
Anne, I mean, yeah, I just threw up the biggest softball question
there were
ever, and
there were some failures. They introduced both of us to other candidates, and that never worked out. But
it eventually worked out. Well, that's awesome. And what an incredible thing that he made an impact so profound in such a short time.
yeah. Oh my God. So that's a big thing I really push onto my leaders. You're most effective at changing somebody's career when they're in their first 5 years. And we always try to
Mhm.
pair people up with somebody who's maybe about 5 years ahead of them to really teach them to take over their job, because they're not going to go up unless they've replaced themselves. So that's a large part of our model. But for me, it has a lot of personal relevance, because without Dave, I would have never sat here.
Yeah, and I love the however you said that about you got so uncomfortable, you became comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, and all young people need to learn how to do that.
it's uncomfortable, but
You know,
yeah, it's true.
one other little side note. So I used to be very uncomfortable about public speaking. So it would scare the hell out of me. So, but because of Dave and being comfortable with that, I started volunteering to do little talks for like architects' offices, little lunch and learn. Started small, but I knew I had to get better at it. So I got, comfortable being uncomfortable in front of people, and to eventually I became comfortable in front of people talking. And I've never had a problem with not talking in front of COA.
I was I was gonna say that uncomfortableness was before I met you because
maybe, yeah, maybe it grew a little bit too good.
yeah, he's a little too comfortable. No. This has been awesome. I'm gonna hit stop now, but thank you, Keith.
All right.
Wait.